All right, good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, February 7th, 2023 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I don't have any announcements this evening. Is there anything the board wants to bring out?
No.
No? Okay. Is there anyone here for anything that's not currently listed on our agenda? Seeing as no, we'll move right into the first agenda item, which is a public hearing for St. Denis Church, special one-day license and possible votes. Anybody care to make a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe you're from St. Denis, sir?
Yep.
And you're looking for a one-day
Alton.
malt and wine license?
Yep.
So
St.
what's
Patrick's Day.
St. Pat?
St. Patrick's Day party, but not on St. Patrick's Day.
Is the malt Guinness?
Well, we haven't decided yet. Oh, I'll vote for
You
that.
got to put a condition on?
Yeah. Can we put a condition that it's Guinness and not
Are
like
you a
Murphy's?
sampler, official sampler?
Go for it.
All right. At least they got all the paperwork in order. Everything's in like it needs to be.
Yes.
And any concerns or questions from either of the public safety chiefs on this?
Nope. They just held one back in September.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
comedy fundraiser.
Yeah, we had the misgivings.
That's fine. I'd make a motion that we approve the malt license requested for St. Denis.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Make sure it's Guinness.
Yes, sir.
I don't think there'll be any nefarious activities taking place.
I think you just offended all the Murphy's drinkers, but that's okay.
I'm allowed to have a preference, aren't I? All right, so the second agenda item is the Audit Selection Committee and possible votes. So, and
We have a couple issues here. One was there was a request put out to the Finance Committee if there were members interested.
I believe it was Dick, Howard, and Heather that were willing to do it.
So that would be the chairman, Dick Vandenberg, the former chairman of FinCom, Howard D'Amico, and Heather Moran, the current chair of the school committee, who was also on the Finance Committee. Schools are a big part of our audit, so it's not entirely a bad idea if she feels like she has the time. And then the recommendation is that you take 2 members of this board who constitute an audit committee of 5.
okay.
And then I would go out to advertise a request for qualifications, basically. And so you don't have to follow 30B for audit services. You don't. You can use any process you want. It's simply recommended that you do this about every 5 years. So I don't know what you want to do first. I don't know if you want to designate your 2 members or if you want to go through the exemplars, because I can briefly tell you how I'd go about advertising, so.
Well, why don't we get membership squared away first and then go through
Yeah.
the template? Does anybody?
Anybody want to volunteer?
I had indicated that I would serve on that search committee.
And I also indicated if nobody else was going to do it, that I would help out with the process. But
Is that-
I wouldn't be offended if somebody wanted to do it.
There's that 2 guys, I think, sitting right there.
I just would remind everyone, Mr. Chairman, that the audit committee is not just about picking the auditor. So you continue to meet and meet with the auditors and review their draft reports before they come back as finals. So the audit committee has an
So this
ongoing,
is a long, ongoing process.
correct.
How often did their reports come out before I nominate Al?
You've already accepted, I think.
But we didn't vote.
Jean is here and she can explain better than I do, but there is a rhythm to this work, right? So after books are closed, the process begins. There are some, do you do your own tests and provide them with some draft tests, or do they start?
No, they do a testing based on standards, and then they come in, they select, again, depending on their requirements, they select the number of tests, and they will randomly pick anything that I paid, both payroll and on the expense side, audits, the contracts, they look at meeting minutes, a variety of things.
It would be a few times a year.
Well, that's done in my office
Yeah.
to even produce the report.
No, for the committee itself, would they be a few?
So the notion of an audit committee is that you actually oversee the work of the auditors and that you would have some say-so. And they would report to you on certain aspects of the work. I'll get into the RFQ in a second. But it is a very common practice for this RFQ to have a reservation like this one from Topsfield has in the scope of work. And I really love this. You can see how dangerous it would be if I were involved in the audit. In addition to the examination of internal controls, the firm shall also examine a separate department of town government chosen by the town per audit year, including a written evaluation of those systems and recommended improvements of same. That is a typical provision in an audit contract that I think we should have. And we don't do it now.
Well,
And if we had had it in place a couple of years back, the silly flimsy excuse that the auditor wouldn't review internal controls would have been violative of a contract if they had that in their contract.
Gene, it's a-
they do certain provisions. They pick a manager every year. That's random, not someone I select. For instance, it was the assistant treasurer. But they, as well as a staff person, they will interview. They always do the chairman of the board of selectmen as well as the town administrator. I'm responsible to fill out audit questionnaires as well. So there's a listing that management and staff have to complete at their selection, not my selection, their selection. In addition to that, I'm supposed to do internal audits of at least one department where I go into their office. You know, it's hard when you're living here because I see their work all the time. And I check their work all the time, so, but I have to go into their office and, you know, make sure they're locking up the cash, make sure it goes from the collection of the receipt all the way through the treasurer to make sure it's following our own policies. So there's a lot that goes on to this.
And this would be additional, and in my opinion, necessary. The audit committee should guide the audit. And to the extent that, because that's the purpose of it, it's for the town's financial decision makers to have assurances that their day-to-day managers, and to some extent the select board as the ultimate approving authority of things, is following the rules. And, you know, not to bring up sore points that are long since kind of past water under the bridge, but they're still unresolved. There was no place for us to go when we had questions about some of the school department's accounting and inventory management around a specific function. And we asked a million people, and we tried to hire outside firms to do it for us, and they said, well, your auditor should be doing that. And then our auditor gave us a letter and said, we don't do that. We need a contract that says there will be an audit committee that is made up of various town leaders that will if they have questions about certain things, they should be able to query of the auditor and have the auditor focus on it. And it should be part of the contract. The board, as you've constituted it, would have a pretty diverse makeup, FinCom, school committee, and select board. So you would be getting a pretty good sampling of the town's leadership to direct this effort.
So kind of back Mike's question that he had asked is, understanding they would probably meet more frequently during the audit process itself.
Yeah, but just, this isn't going to be a heavy lift.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I think you might meet once or twice. You're going to meet early on in scope, and then you might get an exit interview or the preliminary meeting before the audit is presented to the full board for its review.
That answer your questions, you good?
Somewhat.
Now, we didn't do that before.
You've never done it before. So we scoured Lisa scoured town meeting minutes to find any evidence, and you have not done this before. This is a first for the
Rewarded
town of
by
Douglas.
acclamation.
But it is not, by far not the first time a municipality in Massachusetts. So,
We have had an exit interview.
you have to,
Yes.
but you've never done an audit committee.
No. But I want the board to be aware that the auditors, especially, I don't know if they did when you were here, Mike, but prior to that, I know Kevin and Tim and Hal have been available. I think with COVID, probably they didn't come down, but
Right.
we've had an exit interview every year since I've been here, other than COVID years.
And it's fun stuff.
I know, you look forward to it, I'm sorry you couldn't have it.
All right.
Well, I nominate Mr. Bonner and Mr. Fitzpatrick to go ahead and serve as our members on the audit committee.
Do you want to second that one?
I'll second that.
You'll second that.
I abstain.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, gentlemen, for volunteering.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to use this Topsfield example, whatever you want to call it, from your packet. And I'll just go through, I don't typically ever use other people's work product for any RFPs or IFBs or any other sort of procurement process, because then it's, why do that? I think it's lazy, and then if somebody makes a mistake, you're just repeating it. In this particular case, I think that because it's the first time we've gone out, and I want to make sure that the scope of work is comprehensive, that we're willing to pull these 4 examples. One of them was really weak. I won't even name the town. It just really wasn't a professional solicitation. I would like to use the boilerplate language from Topsfield and this proposal form that they have in their package, which they didn't number their pages, I'm sorry, but it has the town seal. It's about halfway into their package.
Page 11. Oh, wait.
Page 9.
And they also have a scope of work, which follows after that form. Scope of services, so in their document, it is labeled item I, as an icicle. It lays out the scope of services, their report requirements, and the town's responsibilities, and that appears in highlighted text. If you're scrolling through really fast, it's highlighted in gray in this copy. That's what I'd like to advertise. I'm going to doctor it up and obviously change all the references to Douglas. And I will work with the finance director to make sure it has all the reports that we expect, and that we're not putting too much on the town. And then the only thing I would take from another example is I just think the town of Lakeville did a nice job of making their advertisement very concise, and their list of requirements, so that's on page 2 of the Lakeville document. But I would dispense with their scoring system, because their scoring system was kind of weak. So really just going to get a firm resume. You disclose an organization chart and who's going to be assigned, and then you, as the audit committee, will rate the strengths of those audit teams and your level of comfort. You probably have to do an interview with different firms, and that's sufficient to pick. I believe there is some statewide attention, so I don't know if it's really, it's exempt from 30B, so there isn't really a statewide contract, but there's a list of firms out there that do a lot of work in Massachusetts. You definitely want to restrict this to firms that work in Massachusetts, because the accounting system in every state is relatively unique. So in terms of advertising this, because we're exempt, we won't put it out there. Who's going to read the Worcester Telegram to figure out who's going to be the auditor for the town of Douglas? We will send it to the industry, right? And so all the firms that we find on any list of qualified firms, we'll make sure they get a copy, and that'll be our advertisement. The Central Register is free, so I put it there just for the sake of having statewide advertising.
Does the MMA give you a free?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
They might.
they always have ads for looking for this and that. So. Good.
So if that's okay, I would just like your authorization in the form of a vote to go ahead and advertise.
I move that we authorize the town administrator to advertise for accounting firm for the town.
Second?
It's audit firm
Audit firm. Okay, corrected.
amended.
Second?
Motion was made by Hal, seconded by Tim. Is there any further discussion on this?
Got a question.
Sure.
That's prior to you revising the draft? Or are you just going to use?
I just told you what I'm going to write. Yeah, I'm trying to be efficient.
Oh, not trying to be different.
I would normally,
Two different towns, that's why I was asking that.
yeah, no, as your chief procurement officer, I don't usually bring the documents to you for approval for advertisement. In this case, I'm bringing the text to you so you can see what is involved in it, because it's the first time through. And also, I want the authorization because really, technically, this is the uncomfortable point, because the people who are being audited are doing the work to advertise, so I would just like to cover. I don't need to be paranoid, but what little cover I get from having an official authorization to put it out.
Does that satisfy your question, Mike?
You gave me an answer. Move on to your vote, if that's what you want to do.
All right, are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, can I get all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
And also, for the record, the town budget includes funds for audit every year, so we have the funds you need to have in place before you go out to advertise.
Does raise the question, have we expanded the scope of the audit that would lead us to adjust our budget?
I think your budget is low. And that is a bridge we'll have to cross when it's appropriate to cross it. The town is going to trigger a single audit, the federal single audit now for several years running, just because of the size of the grant activity that we generate. And if we add some of those that specific service that we have there, yeah. So we've been skating along at what we've been paying for years. You can see it in the budget. It's going to be more than that. 10%, 15% more.
All right, so we're on to number 3, DCR land acquisition notice and possible votes. Yeah, thought I was being smarter than I am.
What, the map?
Yeah, that parcel. I actually lost my entire piece of it. Where the hell did I put it? This is what I get. Pardon my French.
You can look on here.
So, 'cause I think there was a memorandum that came along with it.
Yeah. Oh, just that.
Oh, right here. It was sitting right in front of me. So the email serves as a notice under 301 CMR 51.0. So the Commonwealth, acting through its Department of Conservation and Recreation, has under consideration the acquisition of an interest in approximately 10 acres of land or other property interest therein in the town of Douglas. It's currently forested open space, and the proposed use for the property will be protected open space for conservation and recreation. Attached is a locust map marked Exhibit A, which shows the property in which DCR is interested in, which abuts the state forest as it is.
Does it block access to significant other land? That, I'm trying to figure that out from the map.
Doesn't really dig into that.
Yeah. A few years back, they picked up the parcel that was the last way we could get from 16 across the road to a bunch of industrial land that was over there. That was the access point.
Exactly where is this piece?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, I think.
That looks like the backside of the res, that body of water. So what is that road? It's a horrible map.
Yeah.
Maybe we should wait till we see where it is. Is there any urgency in moving this along? Just the property owner wants to sell it.
Well, we just got it, it says 120-day notice.
So we get time to scope it out.
Well, they want us to waive the 120-day notice.
I don't think 14 days is going to kill them.
Yeah.
We're certainly, I think, more favorable to the Commonwealth doing this after the assistance we've gotten from them. That was,
For sure.
yeah.
I do think it'd be prudent for us to know exactly what it is
Yeah.
we're looking at. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion if one is needed to push this particular agenda item off to our next meeting with a little more clarity.
Yeah, learn about the parcel, how usable it is, and does it provide, does it block access to other land that we might want to develop?
And is it in 61A now?
Yeah.
Or B? It'd be interesting to know.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so we have an introductory discussion on proposed COLA for Worcester Regional Retirement System.
So, Mr. Chairman, it's kind of hard to put this in a nutshell. It defies that. That's why it's on for discussion and introduction tonight, not a vote. The various pension boards around the Commonwealth may, by a vote, grant cost of living adjustments to retirees up to 5% on their own authority. If they seek a COLA of 5% or higher, the law requires that they go back to the members of the pension fund and get a 2/3 positive vote to support a COLA. So I will not pull any punches. I have a great deal of difficulty with the way Worcester Regional conducts itself, their lack of transparency, and the way they fail to honestly disclose exactly what's going on in a way that people can easily understand. The reason why Worcester Regional has to come back to the towns in the Worcester Regional system for a vote is because they have already granted a 3% COLA on their own authority. They have subsequently voted to increase that COLA to 5%. That's why they have to come back to the towns. So they're sending mail around and their briefing documents all talk about a 2%, a 2%, a 2%. They don't need anybody's authorization to do a 2%. They're asking for your authorization because they're doing a 5.
Right. Not very transparent.
No, and it's a bad way to start a financial discussion, because a financial discussion should be really quite simple. The other aspect of this, so as we go through this memo, they do honestly say it in their memo to member unit boards. But you have to know what you're looking at to know how it's all working out. So in the first paragraph, they talk about the law that Governor Baker signed. They talk about the 2/3 vote. And it says in the second sentence, in the second paragraph of this memo, should 34 of our towns approve, the additional 2% COLA would be applied retroactive to July 1st, 2022. So they're already talking about it as a 2. In the next paragraph, they disclose the board previously voted to grant a 3% COLA to the retirees and survivor beneficiaries effective July 1st. So they're upping that to 5. The reason why this becomes a matter of vote for the various boards of selectmen in this pension plan is because it is the intention of this pension to be fully funded by 2036. When you add a cost of living adjustment to a pension and you make it a permanent part of the base, which is what is being proposed, your cost, your assessment will go up for the entire period. So this slide deck and this memo from PIRAC that are also part of your packet explained the mechanism that's going to be used to calculate the town of Douglas's additional assessment. And again, the instructions focused only on the cost of the additional assessment generated by the 2% additional COLA, not the full 5%. Jean asked many, many questions, and so did Cheryl, about how this is actually going to be calculated. And when I followed the instructions in the deck, I came up with one answer. Jean came up with a different answer, because we were using a different reference point, because the number you have to drive your analysis from is buried in documents that you have to seek out. You have to go into the pension board's records to find the number. So they're giving you the actuarial number, a multiplier, a factor. They say multiply that times the total liabilities of the town. I took the total liabilities. Jean used the unfunded liability portion. Since the fund is only about half funded, Jean's number therefore was half of the number I came up with. They verified Jean's number in an email that I'll distribute to you now. There's 5 copies here. I didn't staple them. If you each take the top 2 pages as it comes to you, you'll have the whole thing. The pension board will assess the town an additional $16,000 and change in the first year if the pension COLA is
Is that
approved.
based on the total 5%?
2,
Just the 2, so they can.
and then that figure would go up by 4% a year, every year, compounded. So the grand total of almost 12 years at a run rate of $16,000, $17,000 a year, that's what it will cost the town. An additional assessment above and beyond the town's pension fund assessment, which is already growing at 9.95% a year.
We have a sleeping giant here.
So the decision that the board is faced with, you're the board, not the pension board, you as the Board of Selectmen, is whether or not you're comfortable accepting additional assessment from now through 2036, given its rate of growth, given the performance of this fund. On the other side of it, though, you have the retirees. In the interest of, I know I'm going to forget something, but the important thing for the retirees is that this COLA is not on their entire benefit. It's on the first $16,000 of their benefit. So 5% of $16,000 is not a huge sum of money. It is if you're a retiree. If you're scraping money together to pay for the next delivery of heating oil or the next electricity bill. Even the United States Social Security Administration set a high COLA, a historically high COLA, recently, because they're admitting that inflation is having a huge negative impact on pensions.
8.8.
So that's the decision that you are being asked to make. Are you willing to accept the additional assessment in order to give retirees the boost to their benefit? It sure would help if our board would be more honest with us about exactly how to calculate the number.
If we had a well-funded pension plan, would it be able to often generate enough revenue to cover the COLA without going back to the towns? Hard to say.
In bull market years, maybe.
Yeah.
This fund is, so that's why I put in this extra document here. So after the constituent letter, I inserted this issue brief on cost of living adjustments. This is put together by this National Association. Again, it's, if you watched the Finance Committee meeting, you saw that Ryan Hogan and I had a prolonged colloquy about the inadequacies of Massachusetts, and Worcester Regional in particular. The various funds around the Commonwealth have different levels of funding. And some of the funds are actually overfunded and are doing extremely well, and there's no unfunded liability, and the assessment to the member municipalities is negligible or zero. And the performance of the fund, because we're all in the same fund, we're all in the PIRAC, right? So if you're already funded and the PIRAC has a bad year, it's not the end of the world. But some of the weakest funds in Massachusetts are keeping company with each other below 50% funding levels. City of Quincy, Springfield, the Boston Teachers, and way down there at the bottom, Worcester Regional. So I've seen different numbers. I've seen that, and I think they're a year apart, so maybe I'm being unnecessarily critical, but I've seen 43%, and I've seen a number that's closer to 47%. There is going to come a point where we're all going to get realistic and look at each other and say, I don't think a pension fund, with all the conservative values that are used to inform the investment strategy for a pension fund, is somehow going to miraculously get from 50% funding in 2023 to 100% funding in 2036. That is the biggest myth in the world. If you believe that, there's a bridge in New York City I'll be happy to sell you over and over and over again. It's garbage. It's not going to happen. It is also probably hyperbole and inaccurate to say that the Commonwealth would somehow sit idly by and allow the weaker pension funds to disavow their obligations because they can't make it up. So most of the New England states have court rulings where pension benefits have been ruled, they are not legislative benefits, they are contracts that must be honored. So if you fall short, it will be your assessment that will go up. It won't go up by 9.9%, 5% a year, it'll go up by 12% a year. But the funding requirements will be enforced through that mechanism. Whether or not the Commonwealth gets to 2036 and says, hey, look, there's a whole bunch of funds that are super underfunded.
Bail them out.
So that's where I'm going to tell you I'm an outlier because I don't want you to put too much weight on my opinion, but I do want you to hear it. My experience as a Rhode Islander was what? Pension reform, right? Don Kachari's administration did 3 rounds of pension reform, and now Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, was the state treasurer at the time, and so was Frank Caprio for a while. But between the Caprio Treasury and the Raimondo Treasury, there were numerous bites at the apple because the funding outlook was so negative that you had to go back and cut benefits or restrict benefits or change benefits for all people who are not yet vested. Right? That's the typical mechanism, is we're not going to touch these people's benefits, but if you're not vested yet, your pension is going to look like X. And only in rare cases, in some of the smaller cities and towns in Rhode Island that hadn't fully funded their municipal pensions, some of them were horrible haircuts, like the city of Central Falls, 30-40% cuts in their pension funds. At some point, you have to recognize the reality that if you're not going to be funded, you have to do something. My guess is Massachusetts will default to just increasing the assessments on municipalities. But that really depends on how the market performs. If the market doesn't perform well, if we have a prolonged period of stagnant markets for 5 or 7 years, that 40-some-odd% funding ratio is going to go way down really fast. And so I'm of the view that I wish there were more straightforward and a lot less spin around their marketing of what this COLA means for people.
How many towns are in the system?
Well, they need 34. 34 would be 2/3. So I can
And how
back
many,
out the
have some
number.
voted already, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't,
Well,
at one point, they said they were going to do a running tally, but then they said, now we're not going to.
Yeah, they said they wouldn't publicize I asked that question, that was one of the questions I asked.
It's better position for their position to keep it secret, I guess.
Running tally probably wouldn't help them.
No. Just working in the health insurance side of the universe, knowing blocks of retirees, you know, some of the towns not far from us have really large groups of retirees. They're bigger governments than us, and they've had a greater head count for a really long time. And those retiree groups tend to be very vocal. So, you know, I would think there'd be a substantial amount of pressure to take this vote in a positive way. So I've tried to surface as many issues as I can for you, but what I would encourage you to do, Mr. Chairman, and through you, your entire board, is ask as many questions as you want answered, please, so that we can reach out and see if we can get them answered before you have to vote.
Jane?
Michael has offered to come out to speak with the board if the board wanted him to.
That might help.
In my mind, I was thinking that might be helpful.
If it's all right, Mr. Chairman, could you please, if you issue an invitation, require the underwriter, the actuary for the fund to attend the meeting? No disrespect to Mike, who's the chairman, Mike Sacco. He's a really great pension attorney. He is. And he writes really great briefs, and if you ask him questions about the holdings of the courts, he's right spot on all the time with a great answer. He admits openly he's not a financial guy. He doesn't explain the financial side of it. And this is a financial decision. So while it would be great to have Mike come, it'd be better to have, who was that woman that gave you a briefing?
Linda, but she's the actuary, she's a...
Linda Borneval.
Who's recommending investment advice?
So she is the consulting actuary.
Is she difficult to get, Jane?
I don't know if she'll come to a board meeting. I don't know if they would have to pay for that type of service.
Maybe we can offer to Zoom it. A little bit less troublesome than driving out to Douglas from wherever she is.
I know it doesn't probably serve their purpose, but I find it a little distasteful that we can't find out what the other towns are doing and they wouldn't provide that information to us. I don't think that's very transparent.
Probably divide and conquer.
I think it,
But there's no rule that says that you can't, so the Open Meetings Act doesn't apply to you and a member of the select board from Sutton or Uxbridge or any other member of the, you can reach out to your fellow communities to see what they.
Having already committed to serving on the audit committee, you get A through L and you get F through Z.
I can do that.
I second.
Seems like it belongs under the umbrella of the audit committee.
But when you're like Central Mass Town Administrator Group, if there's such a thing, to be able to quickly,
I can probably help you get a lot of
Yeah.
feedback. There's a lot of change going on,
If not, at least
but
a list of all the serving communities, because I have no problems reaching out.
not that that's going to decide one way or another for me, but
It's just good to know.
Yeah.
But I mean, to Matt's point, I think it would make sense. It never hurts to ask to have him out here and, say it would be extremely beneficial to have the actuary that's in charge of the fund accompany him. Is that something you think we could make happen for the next meeting?
so you need to vote by June 30,
All right,
right?
yeah.
So March, you're going to be a busy board, so this is timely to bring it up now. If you think of where you're going to be, you've got town meeting is on May 1st, so really March and April is going to be budget, budget, budget all the time.
Yeah,
So then if you wait that late, then now you're in May, now you're under some certain amount of time pressure, right? So you're going to have 3 or 4 meetings before you have to decide. So
first meeting in May.
it's up to you guys.
I think 2 weeks is a little too soon to try to digest all this information.
Shoot for the first or second meeting in May and get them out here.
In the meantime, the more questions you have in advance, we can get them answered.
And I think the more notice you give to Michael and that woman, the better chance you're gonna have of having them attend. 2 weeks, they're gonna be like, no.
I mean, isn't their investment advice more relevant than the actuarial? I mean, that's,
I don't know, well, so our funds are invested through PIRAC, right? So
okay. So then why is Worcester, why is it not done as well as it?
So this report I surreptitiously inserted
Yeah.
from the Urban Institute here at the end. This
Yeah.
grades all of the pension funds nationally. There is only one state that gets an F, Massachusetts. And you can go into the reason for their ratings, because I inserted the whole report in here.
So all the pension plans in the state have the same investment? So the Y is one?
You can vote to leave the PIRAC, but there's this convoluted process for doing it. I actually think one of our neighboring communities is out, Northbridge.
So why is ours, if it's the same investment, why is, maybe very obvious, why is our plan for Worcester so not underperforming compared to the,
They're all performing the same, it's where you started from.
okay,
So when everybody was brought under the umbrella, what did you have?
okay, to put
So
into
the
it.
storyline I've heard is that
Yeah.
traditionally, the Worcester Regional Group did not make their contributions, and it was underfunded when they started.
Okay.
Makes sense. Any other questions or comments on this one? No? All right, off to the ARPA discussions, which has been on the agenda for quite a while, and I know we have a list of proposals and things that are sitting in front of us, and I'm pretty confident we've all had a chance to look and review them. I'd like to try and get some more of this moving, or at least get it settled. At this point, Matt was kind enough to put into our packets the unencumbered balance as of the 31st of this year was $1,671,416.40.
Matt, can we use ARPA money and supplement it with our own town money for a project?
Yep.
So I would use, just for the interest of, just for the discussion, use the analogy of my $250 gift card where I didn't use it to buy ski pants. And I whittled it away and I ended up
Should at least get some warm
skiing-
socks out of it.
Skiing in Bermuda shorts.
skiing in Bermuda shorts and that I had to buy.
Yeah.
So I would make an argument that we try and find, a large project and put the bulk of these ARPA monies towards something that the town otherwise would never have an opportunity to truly consider.
What, I think we have two large projects that are sitting on the wings. Both are water sewer projects. The Depot Street project, and then the extension of water sewer up Main Street all the way up to the fire department / highway barn. But we cannot do both.
So, and just for clarity, the extension of Main Street, that's just for the sewer portion. 1.5 million for the sewer portion. Sullivan said it was 7.5 million bringing the water out. So if in fact, just for conversation again, in fact, we move forward with getting the highway department replaced, rebuilt, whatever you want to call it, would it make sense to add that extension of the sewer project in with that particular project? Because overall, with the financing, I don't know if it would be that big of a deal. And then potentially look at this Depot Street project, because you're going to add that into the highway bond, obviously. By bringing that sewer line up, it's going to service the fire department as well as the highway department and subsidize the ratepayers for their extension of the service.
So on the, it makes sense. If we sent out the bids for the highway barn or the highway project, haven't we, or have we gotten
No.
bids back for
No, so we are in the designer selection
designer
process.
selection process? Have we selected a designer?
No, so you're stealing the thunder from my report. That's okay.
I'm like that.
You're just going to make it quicker, right? Keep going.
Yeah, so we got 5 responses. The Building Facilities Committee, it is their task to whittle that down to 3. So they've been picking up their packets, and then their next meeting, they'll be, I think, going through those packets and reviewing the bidders.
So is part of the designer's responsibility picking location? Or have we pretty much settled and said it's going to
So-
reuse the existing footprint?
No, so location is actually one of the primary tasks. Their scope of work for the most immediate project that they must turn their attention to is that for special town meeting in November, they must present town meeting with a conceptual design for a highway barn at a chosen location. And we've given them 3 places to consider, which includes the existing footprint, includes another parcel that's behind the old grammar school / VFW hall. Think of it as behind the Axman, Douglas Axman field in the back. And the other is the Buckeye, the old mobile pipeline.
Which is all in the same general locations, that would make sense for the sewer project to be extended on.
That was the purpose of my ask, is making sure that regardless of which way it goes, that we were going to stay on that side of town. All right. So the consensus is to do, I guess, the first thing is the rest of the board. I mean, are we in agreement with the position from Tim of we put funding towards one large project, or a bulk of the funding towards a large project, and then see if there's a couple other smaller ones that we might be able to add in with what's left over based off of that contribution.
There won't be any left over.
You may never spend.
Will that large contribution require other funds, and are those funds going to be available? You don't want to have sort of half a...
Correct. So the Depot Street is about a $2 million project. The sewer line going up is 1.5, so 1.5 usually fits on 1.6. So if you do this one here, you're about 3.4 short. 340,000 short, sorry.
So the previous one would be clean on its own, take care of it without...
Well, 1 point.
The baggage would be, right, so if you dig up Main Street to do the sewer
Yeah.
with ARPA funds, you obviously are going to replace the really old water pipe
Right.
that breaks all the time
Yeah.
for that same length. And that project would require financing of some kind. Now, Bob's not here tonight to talk it through. I just don't see our existing water enterprise fund being able to swing the borrowing for that. So that would basically be a general town borrowing, I would think. Now, would the Water Commission put in its share? Probably. Can't speak for them. They'd have to ask them, and they would have to have their process. We typically look at the soft costs as being a digestible piece, and then it's the construction that you would go out and finance. Now, if you rolled all of that together into one financial package and said, we're going out to bond for the water improvement necessary to build the new highway barn and for the highway barn itself, I don't see why that would be impossible. I think it would be more complicated. Might be more
Do the
complicated.
bond at the same time for different issues.
You just could potentially add about 30% to the project.
Yeah. That's about right. That's about what it would be. And being the math whizzes that we are, that means you're in a very light pencil, filling in the boundaries of a project that's going to be close to $30 million. So the sewer portion in the end is just a tiny piece.
Right.
It just allows you to utilize your land in a different way. More intensity, not so worried about impervious surfaces and coverage and runoff and everything else. You're going to be taking care of your sewer.
Do we need more information?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to take a swing at Bob one last time before we make a commitment on that, if that's the will of the board or the consensus that the remainder of the ARPA fund go towards one of the two large projects.
Yeah, we'd just like to wrap it up pretty quick. 4 or 5 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, suggested that we had the 31st of January, the deadline, to give them that 23 months. So we can do it by the end of this month, at least they'll have 22 months to expend that money before the deadline hits.
Thoughts, Al?
No, I think we should wait for Bob, obviously, we seem to be leaning in that direction.
What was your recommendation, Tim? So I know you're in favor of
Yeah, no, I think
the
that's
large
good.
project.
My only hesitancy there is that without these monies, it could never withstand market, or the market couldn't support what we're proposing, and I just wonder if the utilization of the second floor up here isn't a greater good. Where I'm at.
But I think that's, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about using ARPA funds for this, for Depot Street. The funding for Main Street water line would be part of the,
That's what we'll have to ask Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Chairman.
but yeah, that's what the
Yeah.
thought process at this moment.
Yeah, the biggest thing I was looking for is a consensus on what we wanted to do.
Yeah, no, I'm all in on that.
You're all out,
So,
Spend the money.
spend the money.
Mr. Chairman, I think the other issue, though, that I want to make sure that you're aware of, it is a fact that you could never justify the extension of sewer down Main Street that far based on users, the current users. Sewer has a funny way of being field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. So if there's the opportunity to connect to sewer, I would predict, having been through this so many times in my life, that residential development pressure would increase substantially in that part of town. You're just making it far easier to develop land.
And that's all VR, those 20,000 square foot.
And a lot of it's in the wellhead protection, so there would be some offset, but you would definitely be changing the economics of a couple of big lots down the end of town. For sure.
That we don't own.
Correct.
All right. That concludes the,
Don't end up building another school.
bite your tongue.
The law of unintended consequences. We did it for a highway barn, and we ended up with a highway barn and 500 houses.
So, Mr. Chairman, for clarity, we're going to have this on the next agenda, invite Mr. Sullivan.
Yes. Yep, that is the plan. So it brings us to meeting minutes.
Actually, maybe an Eric as well, given the
Uh,
economic development argument.
You don't even have to invite Bob, you just say his name 3 times, and he shows up.
Can we start the
Usually
meeting
twice.
3 hours early so we can get out at our normal time?
No, I'll just bring something to eat, and he's sure to show up, so I can't eat it.
Girl Scouts cookies.
But yeah, it would,
Go ahead.
to what? You first.
No, I was going to the minutes, there's 2 dates. Sorry, that's all I wanted.
Okay, so it's Bob Sullivan and Bob and Eric.
Yes.
So the Bobs.
Bob's Square.
Bob
It's
Square.
like Office Space, remember the Bob?
Yeah.
It's an office
Please
space.
invite the Bobs.
You know, Bob,
Yeah,
that's a good movie.
yeah. It's one you can watch all over again.
Yeah.
And what about Bob?
What's that?
What about Bob? That
Baby
was the movie
steps.
that was out there.
Richard Dreyfuss,
Yeah.
baby steps. He was stuck in the elevator. Never seen it.
I don't want to talk about my Claire Hal.
All right, so we're on to meeting minutes. We have 2 dates.
It's not on the agenda, but it is in our minutes. What's going on with our oil situation? Sosha?
I think they're going to be back on in April. Giving them
It
time
was
to,
a 90-day extension.
Yeah.
Time to
Yeah.
get-
90 days?
Yeah.
Hasn't been 90 days yet?
No,
yeah.
no, the first time he came was December 6th.
Right. Less than 90. Got it. I make a motion that we approve the December 6th minutes.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 20th.
Second?
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Your report, Mr. Administrator, that I stole some of the thunder from.
But I'm glad you did. It was timely. We are very nearly done with the public safety radio project. It was a long time coming. I don't know if we did the cutover from one console to the other. I don't think we did it today. Today's electrical work revealed the spaghetti method that has been used to wire up our 30 kW generator.
With the mystery labeling system.
Lots of mystery connections, things that, have been going for 20 years. So the good news is, that's a short-term thing. Once we have a generator, and that's the only thing holding up the electrical project in this building, is taking delivery of the generator. But once that comes on board and we build out the backup power system here for the spring and summertime, that issue will be resolved. So we'll have a new 911 console in the basement, and all of the equipment is up. I actually took a look up at the Church Street Tower and noticed the new equipment up there. I think, Lisa, if we could, for the next meeting of the Select Board in my report, have an example of a typical radio call, and use fire because there's more dialogue, before the new system and then one from after. A lot of folks at home who are paying for this, because it was other than the school buildings, the public safety radio project was the biggest project in Douglas for many years, at $750,000. A lot of people don't listen to the scanner, they don't appreciate what this has done, but it's making it safer for our first responders, more reliable. That's a higher level of service to the public, and it also opens the door to greater interoperability with our mutual aid partner communities. So it was a necessary step. Every so many years, a public safety radio system needs to be revamped, and this was long overdue. It did take a while. We will do an after-action assessment with Marcus Communications to determine what it was that led to the delay from this project to be fully implemented. Some of it is on them and their staffing. Some of it is on supply chain disruption. Some of it's on the weather. But frankly, all's well that ends well, and this seems to have worked out as designed. Probably the most important step here was taking our public safety traffic off legacy copper wires and putting it on a modern fiber network. That's probably made the biggest contribution to the change. Almost all of my time is being spent right now on compensation reform, and I'm finding the limitations of my own days and hours. I have promised the Finance Committee a briefing on this program by next week. So we've been spending every hour of every day trying to get the program to the point where it's presentable. We have an internal committee, consists of myself, the finance director, the treasurer, Holly Cotnoir, who runs our payroll, and Lisa, that has been meeting to rate the various positions and to come up with ratings that will then inform the relative position of the different jobs as between each other. And we will use benchmarks to determine where those rates of compensation are set. So that's the part of the process I'm doing right now, benchmarking. And I'm ending up with 2 sets of benchmarks because it's not really possible to. There is a certain amount of art, not science, that's involved in setting these benchmarks. Because we have one set of communities that are advertising to fill positions right now. It is harder to fill vacancies than it is to keep the person you have. So what you find is a lot of the longest tenured, let's use building commissioners as a good example. It's actually a really powerful example. We have people who have tremendous amount of experience as building commissioners, have served on the BBRS, maybe even as a leader in the BBRS, who are paid X by their community. They've been there for a long time. They don't seem to want to leave. They're intending to retire from there. So they're going along at the pace of compensation change in their community. But if that same community had to go out tomorrow and hire someone to replace that person, they would actually find themselves having to advertise at a higher salary than they're paying. So for us to set a benchmark, we need both pieces of information. You know, what are people willing to work with for a long period of time in their community? And also, what are those communities who are out advertising finding that they need to put out there as a salary to get applications in the door? Both sets of benchmarks are, not always, but generally north of where Douglas pays. So it doesn't really matter how you skin the cat. There's change that needs to happen. The only question is, what can the town afford in a lean budget year? And that's where the even more art is going to come into it. But I, as far as I'm concerned, I have a week, maybe 2 weeks to finish this and get it ready for spring town meeting. I've said it before, one last time. I'm trying to save the town $35,000, $40,000 in a compensation study that would often go to UMass or somebody else, another consulting firm, because I don't think our payroll is big enough to justify that kind of study. I think we can handle it internally. The existing system that we have is very detailed. It has worked for years. It has only broken down because there's only 10 steps, and most people work here far longer than 10 years. So we've ended up with this aberration where everybody's at the top step. They got really low COLAs for a long time, or no COLA for a long time, so their salaries got stuck, even as the rest of the Commonwealth was moving forward pretty aggressively. And after COVID, there's been an explosion in municipal salaries that you can't ignore, because, you know, if we're up against Littleton or some other place, for somebody who lives halfway in between the two towns, we're not going to win that competition ever. So that's not necessarily the best place to be when we're recruiting. And we know from firsthand experience, right? If we hadn't have used networks, professional networks, to identify candidates, we had no applications for community development director that came in from our advertisement, and none that came in for principal assessor based on our advertisement. Those candidates came in the door because we had somebody helping us basically headhunt and recruit people. But that's a tough way to staff town government, because it means you have to eat what you kill, right? Whatever you find to bring in the door through networking, you're not going to have a choice of 3 people, you're going to have 1 person. So that is not a sustainable model for any employer. So we have to fix it. We finally heard back from, we have 3 quotes for the senior bus. The good news is the lowest quote was, we were able to negotiate to within the budget approved by town meeting. So we're going to accept that quote and now get in line for this thing. Nobody's pulling any punches here, right? So nobody's promising any delivery before the end of this calendar year. So it's February now. If all goes to plan, the senior bus will arrive at some point in December or early January 2024. I don't understand it, and I'm not going to try to explain it, because I don't want to own it. It's not my... It appears that the chipsets that are put into all these vehicles now are part of what's being delayed because of COVID and other disruptions in the Asian markets where these things are made. I think nobody's saying it, but I think it's quite true that the decision by the Trump administration to launch itself into a full-blown trade war with the Chinese on certain items probably hasn't helped this at all, but that's what we're waiting for. Progress on construction, and this is my last item, Mr. Chairman. Things have gotten delayed, but that doesn't change what's going to happen. So the delay has been good. What has happened is natural gas contractor has been able to install the pipe past the Gilboa Street construction area so that the gas work is now quote-unquote done. They will not be in each other's way. So now you see the gas crew is coming over from Uxbridge. They're going to be, it's really easy digging through there, so it's very sandy. So they'll be doing about 200 feet a day. They started at the warehouse in Uxbridge, and now they're moving underneath the overpasses for 146. They'll probably be under the bridge tomorrow. And they're going to proceed then up the grade to connect the Shell station and then be connected to the work they've already done. Then they will go back down to finish Gilboa Street and go up North Street. It goes without saying, North Street is going to be a huge challenge, right? So there's ledge in there, the road is in tough shape, and we've already put water and sewer up.
Yeah.
So there's the range of error here is minimal. So gas is going last. That was good from a construction point of view because you didn't have this sewer crew banging around looking for accidentally finding the gas pipe. But now, you know, they have, I think at some point in North Street, they're actually going to be under the sidewalk. So this is the way that's going to have to be installed. Towards the middle and end of this month, you will see signs, striping, and Jersey barriers going up on Gilboa Street, wherever that turns into Lackey Dam Road, on the incline where the bridge is going to go. And they're going to sit there for a while piles are driven. There seems to be a new theory of this, that they're actually going to take off part of Gilboa Street and allow for the grade. So the pile driver is going to go down to the work rather than perch above the work on Gilboa Street and drive down. They're going to be alongside the water and be right alongside the piles as they drive. So the good news is that traffic should still flow on Gilboa Street in two directions. The road is wide there, so there's plenty of room for two lanes. It's just people have to be mindful of the fact that Jersey barriers will be up, closing off the shoulder on the eastbound side. That shoulder's all going to be closed. The traffic's going to be pushed out to what would now be the middle of the road, and the westbound shoulder is going to be active traffic. So that's going to go over the patchwork where the sewer crew put in the sewer line. And at some point in the spring, in late spring, the new sewer pump station will be installed where the old one is now, and that's in the same general area. So that's the progression. Gas got out of the way, now there's going to be the bridge installation, and after the bridge is done, then the sewer pump station has to be put in. So,
When would the repaving
the fall.
fall?
So the last hurrah for this is that the town will get itself a new road,
Yeah,
new pavement job, all the way.
yeah.
But we don't hurry that up. We want the
Yeah.
trenches to sit and settle for a long time before we put that final, the final
Maybe a
curb
nice visible
pave.
thing that everybody can see in town,
Yes.
feel.
I think one open issue, and I think Bob and Eric's in this general direction, so am I, is we really think that we need to pick up the curbs on the side of North Street so that they have a reveal, a better reveal than now, and then, you know, so it's not going to be a simple reclamation, that pavement job. We may have to rebuild a big portion of North Street and at least pick up the curbs, and when the sidewalks are installed, then they would be, you know, a more proper distance from the roadway surface. It's really not safe to have a sidewalk that's 2 inches above the road. So, that's doubtless going to involve some negotiation. Go The whole project has been a negotiation.
That's all big projects are.
Yeah, so that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
We have 10 minutes of Lisa Freeman's time before she turns into a pumpkin
Ooh.
for executive session. No?
Good.
You're good?
She's not going to turn into a pumpkin
Not
today.
tonight.
Are there any open session topics
So,
not
you
reasonable?
lost the battle, are you going to win the war? You didn't tell me that.
Man, she told me she lost.
Oh, okay.
And she accepted defeat graciously, I will say.
Oh, no.
For today.
For today.
Yeah, no.
There'll be a round two. There will be.
Yes, there will.
So are there any open session
Teenagers.
topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of this meeting?
There was a free cash
Oh, yeah.
That was in your report.
report.
So my report has an update on free cash. I asked Gene to give you a number. I assume it's there.
It is.
7, tab 7.
It was no surprise to me, really, but. So your current free cash balance is $2,255,175.
How much of that is spoken for?
No, that's what you have left after you've
Yeah,
already
okay.
spent some. So in the summary report here, you'll see what special town meeting in November utilized. So we had an oil spill transfer, $65,000, $115,000 for the senior center bus, and $45,000 for engineering around South Street. So for the total that was used at special town meeting was $225,000.
Is this historic high for us?
No, last year was. So
Yeah.
you'll be getting it as we go into the budget process. This is really important consideration. Your high water mark was fiscal '21, because then free cash was utilized to settle the teacher's contract. We can't forget that we did that. It was about $1.5 million, $1.3 million. I'm forgetting the exact number. It was over $1 million. I think it was $1.3 million. It's going to be half that much this year. So while we are replenishing free cash and growing it at a fairly significant rate, and we are still historically have much higher unrestricted fund balances than we've had, we were at one point over 10%, which is magic, right? That's a big, that number flashes on the billboard, 10%, 10%, 10%, because
Rating agencies.
your rating agencies look at that as the threshold for a AAA bond rating, right? I never thought we'd get to AAA. I didn't think we'd stay at AA3 either. I thought we would end up somewhere in between, try to make the case for being AA1, right? And
Yeah.
just one step away. We're now closer to 8-point-something%, right? Still good for the town. Are we in striking distance of getting back over 10, even with the capital budget? Yes. And some of what's driving that is the building permit for the cubes at Gilboa, right, is $1 million of unbudgeted revenue. But you're still spending. Your capital budget is still scheduled to be 1.1 million. So we're still looking for other unbudgeted revenues or turnbacks from the departments to keep us growing that fund balance. We may get to the point where we want to have this discussion about how much do you want to leave in your unrestricted fund balance. Are you going to take maybe a holiday from capital spending at some point just to get past that threshold? I don't believe in that. You know, the integrity of the municipal operation has to be consistent through time. And your deferred maintenance or your failure to fund your capital budget just comes to roost later on and creates financial weakness. So you'd be better off taking the AA2 or AA1 bond rating than trying to shoot for the moon and get AAA. I think it's my responsibility to tell you that you can get there if you wanted to. But a lot of the rating agencies are sensitive to the fact that some towns try to do that. And then it just falls apart. So they get their rating, they issue their debt at AAA, and then, you know. So they're savvy to that. They don't let that happen anymore. They look for strength over time. So then you need to show a time series where you've been able to do it. Getting a lower bond rating is extremely important if you're going to borrow in this
Higher
environment.
rating.
right? Yeah, a higher bond rating, a better bond rating, lowers your interest rate, and we are in a high interest rate environment. And the most recent discussion with the Fed is that despite their rate increases, they haven't slowed down economic activity. So inflation, there's still inflationary pressure on the economy, which means they may boost rates again to try to slow it down.
Quarter.
So that's bad news for us as a municipality looking to borrow.
Anything else?
Tim Special.
Looking for a Timmy special.
Oh, All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will make a motion that we move into executive session to follow up on a discussion of building security with the Douglas Fire Department, to also talk some litigation, and then we are going to leave that meeting for the purpose of adjournment.
You make it so fun.
Yeah. Hey,
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing is none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Fitzpatrick, aye.
Bone and I.
Morris, aye.
Davis, aye.
Excellent.